everyone, in this video we are going to discuss minerals. So what are minerals? Well, minerals are just very, very simple. They are ions or ionic compounds that are essential for human life. Okay. So now the thing I want to point out is that unlike vitamins, minerals are going to be your ionic compounds, where your vitamins are your organic compounds, okay? So we need to make sure we keep them separate. However, they do have one thing in common. Both minerals and vitamins are what we consider micronutrients. So in order for a human being to be properly nourished, they need to have minerals and vitamins in a small amount, a micro amount in their human body. So now when we talk about minerals, we usually break them apart into three different categories. So the first one are considered your macro minerals. So your macro minerals are things that you, first of all, you absolutely need to memorize. So let me give you a list of them. So you have calcium, you have phosphorus, chlorine, potassium, sulfur, sodium, and magnesium. Yes, you need to memorize those. Put them on a flashcard today. You need to get those down. So for our macro minerals, we must ingest these daily, but on a macro amount, so a large amount. We need the most of these specific minerals. So usually it's anywhere between 1 to 2 grams daily that you have to ingest. We don't just store our minerals in our body. You have to ingest these daily in order for you to have proper metabolic function, essentially. After macro minerals, we also have micro minerals. The micro minerals are much easier to memorize because there's only 3. You have iron, you have copper, and you have zinc. So unlike our macro minerals, you still do have to ingest them daily, but unlike the macro minerals, you do not have to ingest nearly as much. So usually when we're talking about our micro minerals, we are ingesting something on the milligram scale. Okay, so macro minerals, it's 1 to 2 grams every single day. For our micro minerals, it's 1 to 2 milligrams, or maybe even more, 50 or 100 milligrams daily. It really just depends on which of the 3 micro minerals we're discussing. And the last one is our trace minerals. Now our trace minerals, there's a lot of different ones. I personally don't have them memorized, so I would never expect for you to have them memorized, but I do want you to be familiar with them. So the common trace minerals in our system are iodine, fluorine, selenium, vanadium, chromium, manganese, cobalt, nickel, molybdenum, boron, silicon, and tin. Okay, so I would be very familiar with these. So anytime you hear the word trace, that is usually a scientist or a chemist trying to indicate you that we can barely detect it. So I'm saying that we know that we have all of these different elements inside the human body, but they're in such a small quantity. So what we say for trace minerals is we must ingest them. And again, we put daily, but this is on a teeny, teeny, tiny scale. We usually use the word tiny when we talk about trace minerals. And so just to kind of give you an example, usually we're talking about micrograms. So let's review. Macro minerals, you have a gram of. Micro minerals, you have a milligram of. Trace minerals, you have micrograms of. People get confused here because of the words micro and macro, and they're all over the place, and milli and micro. So just please, please, please be super, super careful and get this all very clear in your head today. Don't wait till the last minute and study because you won't be able to memorize it before the exam. All right, so now what I want to do here is show you a table of all of the minerals that are essential for human life. So every single one of these elements that are highlighted, you absolutely need to have in your system every single day in order to survive and to continue surviving, okay? So I'm going to ask you here, which of the following minerals, and I'm going to give you a list of 4, does the human body require the most of? So which one of these do we need the most of in order to survive? Your options are manganese, magnesium, molybdenum, or mendelevium. Go. All right, did you get an answer? Hopefully you did, and all you really had to do was look on our table here, our periodic table, and see if we have any of these 4 that I've provided for you. We want to see if any of them are considered to be macro minerals. So you're looking to see if any of them were yellow. So basically, hopefully you were able to just look at that and quickly identify magnesium as your macro mineral. Manganese and molybdenum are both micro minerals, and then mendelevium is radioactive. So you definitely don't want to ever ingest that if you can avoid it. All right, so now what I want to do is point out our 5 crucial electrolytes. So we have our sodium and magnesium, potassium and calcium, so these 4 right here. And then if we go across the table, we can also highlight chlorine, okay? So we have 5 crucial electrolytes that are absolutely needed for our system. Now, what is an electrolyte before I continue on with that? An electrolyte is simply an ion or ions that conduct electricity in water. So this is something that is huge. It is very, very, very important in order for our body to do anything that is actually useful. So for our heart to beat or for our muscles to contract, so any movements or any breathing or just basically keeping us alive, you absolutely have to have 5 crucial electrolytes. So what we're going to do is break these down and talk about each one of them individually. So there's going to be a lot of notes here, so just get ready for it. So the first one we want to talk about is Calcium 2 Plus. This is your most abundant metal found in the human body. And the big uses that we have for calcium is that calcium is used in blood clotting, so we definitely need that. The big one, the one people mostly focus on, are muscle contractions. Okay, we absolutely need our calcium in order to contract our muscles. And then the last one, which is something that is very important, if you ever have any nerve damage, people a lot of times like to talk about calcium, but nerve impulses, all right? So anytime we have that electricity, so we have anything shooting through our movement of electrons through our system, it has to do with these ions or these electrolytes. So that's calcium. Now let's look at sodium. Sodium usually exists in the +1 state in our body. And for sodium, we have a very, very important piece of information for our health system that you always hear, is that you have a max of 2.4 grams of sodium plus that you should ingest per day. Okay, you need to watch your diet. You need to be very, very careful of this. The reason being is if you ingest too much sodium plus results in high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is no joke. The second the doctor finds out that you have high blood pressure, they almost instantaneously put you on a medication to lower your blood pressure. It is just not a good thing. You don't want that. Now, outside of this, we have sodium a lot of time in your lymph and blood serum. But more importantly, this is outside of cells. Okay, outside of cells. All right, we're going to come back to this point in just a second. Number 3, third electrolyte we're going to look at is potassium. Again, potassium is in the +1 state, and just like sodium, we have a maximum amount. So except for potassium, you can only handle 2 grams of potassium per day. Okay, again, watch your diet. You do not want to be ingesting a lot of potassium or a lot of sodium. Now, our potassium is primarily located within your cells. Okay, so while your sodium is located outside, a lot of times your potassium is located within the cells, so the inside of this. Now, the most important thing that you use potassium for is you use it in conjunction with your sodium. So I would say potassium plus and sodium plus. You need both of them work together to make your heart beat. Your heart beat. Okay, you need both of them. So both ions work together, and it's a lot of processes of electricity, and you're kind of shooting electrons through the system to encourage your heart to actually have that contraction and do that pulse. Remember, your heart's a muscle, so we need those pulses, okay? Number 4. The last one we're going to talk about in terms of cations is your Magnesium 2 Plus, and it definitely is in the 2 plus state when it's inside of your system. This is your second most abundant metal in your body. Okay, so this is after calcium. Now, magnesium has two very important functions. The first one is that it helps generate energy. If you did not have magnesium, you would not be able to use ATP properly, and ATP is one of the biggest sources of energy inside of your body. So if you didn't have magnesium, you wouldn't be able to use your ATP, so that would be a huge, huge problem. And magnesium also helps with the release of muscle contraction. So in the same way that your sodium and your your calcium works with your muscle contraction. The magnesium works on the opposite end. It almost helps with it relaxing. Okay, so calcium contracts, magnesium relaxes. Okay, now the last one I want to talk about is the only anion. Okay, so chlorine, and it actually makes up the majority of anions in your body. Usually where people report the number around 70%. So 70% of the ions in your body are chlorine. So that means that the majority of use of them are to balance charges. You do not want to have any electrons, any positives or negatives, any anions or cations just floating around in your system. You want to have all charges balanced. The last thing you want is just one random electron running around alkylating your DNA. You don't want that. So we use chlorine to balance out all 4 of those previous cations. Now, aside from balancing charges, chlorine actually is really nice, and it helps with the transmitting of body fluids, specifically in the process of osmosis. So if we're moving some kind of fluid into and out of cells, we need to have chlorine in order to help that process. And the last thing I want to point out with chlorine is that it's existent in stomach acid. So if you've ever had kind of burped up something and didn't feel right, maybe it burned in your throat, that's because you just burped up a little bit of hydrochloric acid. So in your stomach, a lot of times you have hydrochloric acid. The chlorine is there to help. You need that really, really strong acid to break apart your food and then use whatever is there in the food, the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats, whatever is there to actually help with your human function. All right, so that's all I'm going to tell you about electrolytes. I know it was a lot, so thank you for bearing with me. But now what we're going to do is end with a little fun problem. So now a Dr. Pepper 10, okay, delicious soda, contains 60 milligrams of sodium. Okay, so that's how much this Dr. Pepper 10 has. Now, a daily diet or a daily dose of sodium should be 2.4 grams, okay, for your daily intake. So what percentage is your intake of sodium just from your Dr. Pepper 10? Go. All right, did you get an answer? Hopefully you did, but if you didn't, that's completely okay. Basically, what we wanted to figure out was what percentage of your daily allowed sodium is in your Dr. Pepper 10. So how much sodium is actually there? So the first thing you have to do is convert your 60 milligrams into grams. So the first thing I do is I put 1,000 milligrams on the bottom, and I put 1 gram on the top. And if you do this properly, you end up with a result of 0.06 grams of sodium, and that's in a Dr. Pepper 10. So now we want to know about a relative percentage. So all we have to do is take 0.06 grams of sodium from our Dr. Pepper 10, divide that by our daily allowed dose of 2.4 grams, and if you get this solve it properly, you end up with a value of 0.025. Now we want it in percent, so you multiply that times 100, and you end up with 2.5%. So 1 Dr. Pepper 10 is not going to be too much sodium for you. However, if you drink 50 Dr. Pepper 10s or you drink a lot of soda, you're definitely going to have a really, really high sodium content. So be very careful, be very aware of your sodium intake, okay? Have a great week, take care of yourself, and drink water.